to Beyond Transcendence with Andrew. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. On today's show, I have Jonathon Aslay. The focus of one of America's midlife dating coaches with over 195,000 YouTube subscribers has expanded into a deeper, essential philosophy of what it truly means to love. After losing his 19-year-old son, Connor, in 2018, Jonathon Aslay's grief led him on a soul-searching journey where he became aware of an often overlooked dimension of the dating conversation. He realized that the dating process reveals the most common emotional health issue faced by many singles seeking a partner: a distressing lack of self-worth, self-regard, and self-love. Today, he is on a mission to encourage both men and women to fully love themselves with his new book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Packed with fun, engaging spiritual and personal growth practices, and his dynamic midlife love mastery mentorship program, which inspires hundreds of people daily around the world. Please welcome Jonathon Aslay. Welcome to my show, Jonathon.
Hey, Andrew, how you doing? I'm excited to be here.
Well, tell me about your journey, like what started your whole life purpose.
You know, when I think back to when I was in my 20s, and by the way, I'm a tail end baby boomer Gen Xer. I was raised with that belief: go to college, get a job, meet a girl, get married, buy a house, start a family. And that was my programming. And for, many of us baby boomers and certainly Gen Xers, that was kind of the prevailing narrative. And not to suggest that's any different that much today, but it was certainly really ingrained in us. And I followed that blueprint, to a T. And right around 2005, well, a little after 2005, 2007, I found myself in a position where I lost my high-end corporate job. I was going through a divorce, and then the market crash of 2008 wiped me out financially. And my identity was decimated. I mean, completely decimated, because men oftentimes associate their professional life with their identity and their ability, what they have in their bank account is a way oftentimes men identify with themselves. So in that particular case, I was beginning my dark night of the soul. I was in the pit of despair emotionally. I used drugs and alcohol to kind of numb the pain. And online dating was my second drug of choice. And what I mean is the whole dopamine hit when you're connecting with someone. This was before social media really began taking off. I mean, around 2007-ish. That's when social media was still in its infancy. And so my dopamine hit was speaking to women online. But Andrew, what was fascinating was, here I am. My previous profession was an insurance broker. I was out of work, living on fumes financially. And I didn't realize that this addiction to online dating ended up becoming my eventual purpose in life, because, I can go more granular about what happened, but now I'm a pretty significant dating and relationship coach out in the industry.
That's amazing. So what were some of the challenges you found with becoming a dating and relationship coach?
So at first, to kind of give you a little, I'm going to rewind a little bit for the backstory. So when I said I was addicted to online dating, what it was I was communicating with women. And back then it was quite a bit different than today. But I was divorced male, couple kids, in my 40s, speaking to women online, whether it was instant messenger, telephone calls. And in many cases, I was communicating with women all across the country. And Andrew, here's what happened is I was listening to their stories of divorce. I was listening to their experiences, parenting their children. And I was sharing my own experiences. And effectively, I didn't realize that this was a form of therapy for me. I was I was it was like talk therapy in a way. And I mean, I'm speaking to multiple women every day, and really not necessarily physically meeting them. I was lonely, I was depressed, I was in need of attention. And yes, I went out on dates. In fact, I went out on a lot of first dates. And at first, I was always thinking the woman was the problem. But after about 100 first dates, I realized the common denominator was I was the problem. And so around that time, I began a personal development journey. And Tony Robbins has been big for quite some time, and I had Tony Robbins CDs, and I was listening to Abraham Hicks and Wayne Dyer and Joe Dispenza, and I mean the movie The Secret came out around that time, and I was immersing myself in this spiritual component of my life. But at the same time, women I was communicating with, some of them would say, "Hey, Jonathan, will you look at my dating profile and help me make it better?" Like, it wasn't like I would date them. They just asked for my advice. And then, Andrew, I'd tweak their profile. I'd say, put this picture, say these things. And then a month later, they go, "Jonathan, I met this guy. Would you look at his profile and tell me what you think?" And I realized I had a knack for intuitively reading into the energy because, I went through a divorce, alimony, child support, visitation rights. I'm now in my 40s. I'm going through ED. I'm dealing with women going through menopause, and then as I've gotten older, it's people your parents in assisted living facilities, and all of these factors play a role in our mating practices today for those over 45 years old, because roughly 75% of singles over 45 years old are divorced. So this was how my business got started. Was at first I was just being asked on an informal basis for advice, and I'm like, "Hey, why don't you put up a website and become a dating coach?" This was 2009-ish, 2010. And literally from that moment on, I haven't looked back professionally.
That's amazing. So what are your overall goals? What are you hoping to achieve at the end of the day? What's going to make you satisfied, happy?
And that's a great question. I really appreciate that question because I'm blessed to have a YouTube channel with almost 200,000 followers. I say this because my videos will get a fair amount of attention. And in that, I read the comments and I get comments like, "You made a difference in my life. Oh my God, your advice was so valuable. Oh my God, it was exactly what I experienced." And so when I feel as though I'm an agent for change. And let me share with you, even though I'm a dating and relationship coach, I use the dating and relationship conversation to actually encourage personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy, because nothing triggers our shit like relationships. And the dating process today is so dysfunctional that humans are triggered every second of the day, whether it's a swipe left, a swipe right, a ghost here, a ghost there, a situationship here, a situationship there, And so I real like my real passion is like, I'm not here to teach techniques. Send a guy these 3 text messages when he pulls away. I mean, it might be the door opener for conversation, but it's always coming back to self-love. And why I share self-love is that in 2018, I lost my 19-year-old son to an accident. And in my grief, I made a choice. I could grieve with suffering or I could grieve with love. I mean, that was the choice I made. And I know he wouldn't want me to suffer one day in my life. So I began writing my second book, which is if you can see behind me, it says, What the heck is self-love anyway? A journey of personal development, self-help, and spiritual work. To encourage it's not about dating and relationships, it's about finding the relationship within yourself.
That's beautiful. I like that. So what is something that you can teach my audience about relationships or just about self-love?
I'm sorry I laughed because,
That's okay.
that's a question I can spend the next 10 years answering. So because it can be very granular. What I want to encourage those who are actively dating is to write this down. And if you're not familiar with something known as love attachment style, not Love American Style, the 1960s TV show, Love Attachment Style. And why this is so critically important is they've done studies on how we attach to another human being. And most there's a secure and insecure way we attach to people. And most often it's insecure. And within the insecure category, there is anxious people and avoidant people. And within avoidant, there's a couple different styles. So most likely, anytime you've experienced what you thought was love, was most likely an insecure attachment to another human being. And so if you've ever felt gigantic anxiety and you go, oh, that must be love. No, that's an unhealthy space within you that feels that the other person it's almost like I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. I need you to love me so I feel good about myself. And self-love is I love myself and I can give to another human being without depleting my own love cup. That's what kind of is a secure way of attaching. But here's the tricky part, Andrew. Most humans are delusional. Most humans are gaslighting themselves. Most humans wear rose-colored glasses. They believe they're secure, and they believe everybody else is the unhealthy one. Because remember when I told you I went on 100 internet dates? And I realized after I was pointing the finger at the other person, I go, you know what? I'm the common denominator here. So it's really, and I'm going to take this a step further. It's about knowing who you are, and from a romantic sense, start with knowing your love attachment style. That'd be one of, again, I can talk about 5 or 6 things that I think is important in the know thyself category.
Oh, that's beautiful. So yeah, you assumed accountability. You realize that the person inside of you is the problem and not the people around you. That's what I'm starting to learn on my journey as well, is to
Yeah.
assume accountability and understand that I use my trauma because I suffered from trauma and I use it
Okay.
now as my superpower. That's why I started the
Yeah.
podcast. So we kind of did the same thing. Yours was divorce, mine was trauma, and look at us now. So
Well,
it's, go ahead.
but so I want to piggyback on that because I didn't wake up until this humbling event, you know, going through a divorce, losing my high-end corporate job, and getting wiped out in the market crash of 2008. So, and those were happening all at the same time. So my identity wiped out was my trauma, if you will. I mean, money, all those things, right? At that point, I began doing personal development, self-help, and spiritual work and therapy to heal the trauma that occurred. You had yours, I had mine. So fast forward 10 years later, I had built up so much emotional scaffolding within my life that by the time my son passed away in 2018, it didn't decimate me. It didn't, and I'm so, for anyone who's experienced this, my heart goes out to you. I mean, I'm reaching through the camera and giving you a big hug because, many parents don't survive that emotional grief. And his passing fueled me because I had this emotional scaffolding prior to, his passing, which is, again, I'm a huge advocate for individual work. And as you said earlier, taking responsibility. I do want to say this. Listen, people can do really shitty things to other people, and some intentionally, some unintentionally. Most people are good people. They just unintentionally hurt people. There's a collateral damage to their trauma. Hurt people hurt other people. You know, I don't believe they do it intentionally most of the time, but it can feel that way. Um, but personal responsibility is at least going, okay, I don't have to absolve somebody else's behavior that was inconsiderate or even toxic or traumatic to me. But if you're holding on to blame and not looking inward for the healing, then you're just carrying, you know, rocks in a backpack that are unnecessary in my mind. Because self-responsibility is going, okay, I know the shit that triggers me. Like I bet you know what triggers you, right? You know what triggers you. I'm like, okay, this just triggered me. I'm going to take ownership of my trigger and say to the person that might have been the, you know, the instigator of it, and I don't mean in an intentional way, like, look, I'm going to manage my own feelings. It's no one else's responsibility to manage my feelings. That's my responsibility.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I respect. And that's what I'm learning too. Like when things don't go our way, it's like there's a reason it's happening. You got to
Yeah.
look for the blessings instead of like the catastrophic failures. Like a catastrophic failure is actually something that is going to reward you in the end because it's teaching you self-preservation, it's teaching
Yeah.
you life skills. And that's what I'm learning because I left my corporate job to start
Okay.
this podcast, and I'm also a quantum healing hypnotherapist
Okay.
and also writing a book right now about my story, about my trauma, and just loving just, you know, this whole podcast because I get to communicate and get to meet wonderful people all over the
Yeah.
world. And I mean, what person can say they can go to their job every day and be like, hey, I talked to this person in this country, or hey, I got to get to know this person. It's wonderful when you actually take ownership of your own self like responsibility and then use it to fuel your business, use it to fuel your life. And that's what I do now. I just take everything self accountable and then I just push it out there to myself and I keep going with it.
Yeah. Well, that takes a lot of bravery to do what you did. And for those listening, you know, I truly believe that the way our society is set up is we're basically programmed to be robots. You know, we're programmed to be, you know, just fit like, you know, the ant's job is to carry this little grain of sand over here kind of thing. And there are those who go, you know what? I'm grateful that we live in a society where there's a relative amount of safety and protection. But you know what? I also have freedom to kind of go outside of the matrix, if you will, and explore, you know, and being responsible at it, you know, not, I mean, you know, I suspect you did this in a very responsible, you know, emotionally ethical way. Um, you know, it's this experience that's called life is designed to experience all kinds of emotions. I truly believe that our bodies are just receptors for emotions, and you know, and our heart and our mind and our intuition are actually very integrated to our spiritual side, and to this, you know, look at bad things happen to good people. I lost my son. That's a really fucking shitty thing. And I made a choice. I'm gonna choose to thrive from the experience versus, you know, and again, no disrespect to anyone who's hurting right now. But I looked at that as an opportunity to help me become more of who I am. And from a spiritual sense, he's with me every day. I mean, we hang out and we smoke a joint every day, and I mean saying that metaphorically speaking.
Totally. Yeah, no, I lost my mother in 2021 and that was like the growing moment for spirituality and just understanding myself because I was in a relationship for 7 years and it was a loveless relationship where I got completely comfortable. And at the end of it, I just didn't want it anymore. And I just was so angry. And then I met a lady who just introduced me to Dolores Cannon. And then it just took off after that. And then I just keep feeding my brain full of knowledge like Neville Goddard and
Yeah, sure.
Charles Hannell, and like I got a life coach now, and it's great. Like it's fun. Like I use my time wisely. I don't run on psychological time, as Eckhart Tolle calls it.
Yeah.
But it's great. Yeah, I love it.
Well, I believe an introspective life is more. Again, I can only speak for myself because everybody's journey is different, but I'm blessed with a significant amount of time where I get to examine my emotions, my fears, my insecurities, my negative patterns, my limiting beliefs, my judgments of others, how my actions might affect other human beings, and I'm constantly looking at how can I return to love? How can I be more loving for myself? How can I be loving to more people? That's on the forefront of my consciousness. I mean it's on the forefront. It's not a passive thing. It's in the back of my mind. I wake up with that consciousness, and meditation is part of my practice for healing. Listening to podcasts like yours or others. I have a circle of friends where I can process things, like with life coaches and such. Have a therapist when I need to really process or unpack something, challenging. And I do want to say this. 15 years ago, I did therapy, I did the Hoffman process, I did Insight Institute, I did Reiki, I did neuro-linguistic programming. I've got over 3,000 hours of work under my belt. So this didn't happen overnight. I've been at it for 15 years. And I've been in the dark night of the soul. I've had to face my shadow. Really face my shadow. And there was a moment where I completely lost my identity facing my shadow. And it was scary as fuck. But I now feel like those were all battle, I was being battle tested, in different campaigns. I'm thinking from a war perspective, from an emotional sense, and I'm going to own this. I feel like an emotional warrior, and I don't want to. I know that sounds arrogant, but developing a strong emotional, as I said, scaffolding, IQ, maturity, is not for the faint of heart. You got to want this. You got to want to build a real emotional structure within yourself. Let me say one other thing, Andrew. I believe humanity we're at the precipice, or we're at the beginning stages of developing true emotional maturity through all the chaos that's been going on, because we no longer, at least here in the United States, I know you're in Canada, but here in the United States, we predominantly don't live from a soul survival basis. Like, we're not worried about war, for the most part. Most people live in not crime-ridden areas, so we're not always in fear of basic survival. I think humanity is on the verge of really developing on an emotional level, and we are going through so much dysfunctionality because we're just at the beginning stages. I believe 300 or 400 years from now, we're going to be seeing some really significant, the vast majority of human beings are going to have strong emotional maturity. But it's going to take a while to get there.
Definitely. And it's funny how you say that, because myself, I'm an empath. So when I go out in public, I feel everything. So I used to get headaches. But the other day, since I started following Neville Goddard and doing this leaf exercise where you visualize a leaf falling from a tree and you count the leaves swaying from left to right. And then you do this reverse exercise, which plays back your entire day.
Yeah.
And you just go out in public now and there's like no noise. It's just silence. Yeah. It's like being in the now, like Eckhart Tolle experienced when he had his suicidal breakdown. And it was beautiful.
Hey, I can tap into that, because when I told you I was in the pit of despair, there was about 6 months in my life where I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. It was that painful. And I'd be shocked if there isn't a person listening to this that hasn't had some sort of trauma. And we oftentimes think of the word trauma as significant abuse, whether it was physical or emotional or, psychological, which I guess is emotional. I had a teacher tell everyone in the classroom, I was in third grade, tell everyone I was stupid. Like, believe it or not, this, I mean, I'm now, it's 50 plus years later, and I still, I have this little kid inside of me that thinks he's stupid, and that was trauma. You know, I got in a fight in school with a kid. That's a trauma. I mean, the garden variety stuff many of us experienced is trauma. We just think of the word in the extreme case, but by the way, think about this, Andrew. I oftentimes think about this. How many times did our parents say no to us over and over and over and over and over again? I mean, to a child who can't comprehend that, that's got to be traumatic. I mean, it's, not that yes should be reinforced over and over again, because that could create, a person without boundaries. But, there's no real conversation about just that being a legitimately traumatic experience, because we always think of the big things, not the little things.
Definitely. No, I agree. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Jonathan, and I'm so glad to have met you, and I wish you nothing but continued success and limited possibilities, and much love to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to share. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Beyond Transcendence with Andrew. Today, Jonathon Aslay shared his powerful story of transformation, reminding us that even in our greatest challenges, we can find strength to rewrite our lives. His insights into self-love, love attachment styles, and the importance of emotional maturity are invaluable tools for navigating relationships and personal growth. Remember, taking responsibility for your emotional health is the foundation for building deeper connections with yourself and others. Until next time, keep growing, keep loving, and stay true to your journey. Much love.